Let's get started. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Rockdale Planning and Zoning this day, Tuesday, April 1st. April Fools. Let's go ahead and have a roll call, please.
Chair Williams.
Here.
Vice Chair Ratliff. Commissioner Miles.
Here.
Commissioner Willie.
Here.
Commissioner Houston. Commissioner Slobod.
Here.
And our council liaison, Starnes.
He's outside.
Here, but coming here, but not.
Therefore, we do have a quorum. Let's go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance and stand for the invocation also. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray in the name of the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day and for all the blessings that you give us. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to come together in this meeting. Let your Spirit be among us and guide our thoughts and our words and the decisions that we make today, that all might be pleasing in your name. Lord, we ask for your prayers for the city of Rockdale, through the tragedies that have been suffered recently, and ask you specifically to be with the McBride family and the McCaffey family. May their souls rest in peace. All of this we ask in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Receive a report from Doug Williams. The following items were all approved under consent agenda. Items that we should be paying attention to were preliminary plat submitted by Winston Parks for property located at 618 US Highway 79 into 3 lots. Consider taking any necessary action on approval regarding a final plat submitted by Philip Vargas for property located at 600 block of Texas Street, and approval regarding a final plat submitted by Philip Vargas for property located in the 700 block of Texas Street, and approval regarding a final plat submitted by Ranch Road Development for property located in the 1100 block of North FM 487. And that was all approved under consent agenda. Action items: review and approve the minutes from the meetings on March 4th and March 18th, 2025, and that should be the next tab in your packet. Review and approve the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes as written.
We have a second.
I'll second.
All those in favor of approving the minutes, raise your right hand. Motion made, seconded, and approved. Number 3, receive the monthly code enforcement report.
Commission code enforcement high grass season is officially upon us, but this report, it started towards the end of February. So I've made some notes. We have a total of 29 trash cases. We opened 10 new in the month of February. We have 26 high grass and weed cases, with 17 new ones being opened in February. And then we have other category, which is your property maintenance, nobody pulling permits, things of that nature, and we had 5 of those, which means that there was 32 new cases in the month of March. You can see the breakdown in your pie chart that 43% of those are trash, 36% are high grass, and 19% are other. As far as the fiscal, we've completed 30 cases that have been closed out, 3 are currently in court, and then we have 35 open cases because they have not met their deadline to go speak to the judge. And then we've kept the running tally that the commission has asked us to keep since we've started proactive code enforcement in 2021. And that number is we have 1,174 cases completed, 12 are in court, and then the 35 open from this month. There are a few others that have asked for some extensions, so if you see those numbers, they don't add up quite because we've had some previous months, so they'll need about 60 to 90 days for a violation, and we've granted them that extension.
Any communications with the judge, or is everything?
Yes, we're working closely with the judge, and we're at an all-time high, I think, of collaboration.
Questions?
I have a couple. Is there any way to, in setting up a report to also look at how many are repeat offenders? And I guess at some point, is it possible to create a spreadsheet showing
Would you be asking for this year, or a repeat as in multi-year or multi-month, or?
I guess maybe month, whatever makes sense for reporting, but I would like to, is this a piece of property that is a chronic case or not? Any chance also of creating a spreadsheet that shows more of the addresses, if at all possible? It's hard to get a picture of what's going on from the pie chart.
Yeah, heard. We used to do a spreadsheet like that, and we can certainly do that again, because that's what I keep. So on my end, I have a spreadsheet with names, addresses. It's sorted by address, and dates that letters were sent, because we have to keep a much more in-depth than this. This is something that's just
Yeah, we
a
did
short
that.
summary.
Yeah, we did that.
Because it was
gets
too
to
much
be a major
information.
Report, and we just wanted to do it.
Well, I think this too, but it may be, maybe not every meeting, but perhaps at some regular basis, get a spreadsheet, so you gotta look about where they are, recognize, and be real clear. I often drive around, so the question is that something you've already identified, or is this something I need to?
Well, I'm gonna ask commission to hold down on that. If I read the diagnostic reports and all that, we may be redoing some of our,
This report can include anything you want to see.
Okay.
So this is generated for your viewing. And so I keep an in-depth spreadsheet that I can give you whatever numbers that you would like.
Could you just give him a copy of the addresses? I mean, we're fine with
you need an assistant?
Agree with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we moved from that to this to try
Right.
to narrow it down so it won't be such a long report. But I mean, if you want to know that, I would say just give him a copy.
Sure, if you want more information, reach out to me individually.
Okay.
I'll have to take some stuff off there that are confidential, but other than that, I can give you the spreadsheet.
Okay.
Any other questions on the report?
Yeah, more questions, right? Oh, is
So that was,
Okay. Moving on to the next item. Receive the Development Services Department report.
Okay, so for the month of March, Development Services has issued 20 building permits, 3 demolition permits, 3 electrical, and 13 plumbing. In those building permits, we've had 8 new homes. 2 of those are from the home program, and then 6 are from Cornerstone, which is at a rough estimate of a little over $1 million in improvements. For that, we did not hold any development meetings this month. And with that, I'll field any questions you might have.
I'd also like to update the commission. We did receive word early last week that for Republic Ridge, the new subdivision that Philip Vargas is doing, he was actually planning to get under construction either this month, I was really anticipating next month, but his home builder, Lennar, backed out on him. So he's going to have to go back and find a new builder to contract with to build the homes over there. He's working on that. He said there's been a lot of interest, that people are interested in working with him, but some of those that he's been talking to have asked about the possibility of larger lots. And I told him I think that would be perfectly acceptable, but he would have to go through the process for rezoning again and replatting.
So Republic Ridge is Texas Street?
Yes.
Side, right over there, and that's one we went to 40-foot,
We went, yes, 30 and 40-foot lots.
right. Right.
So,
Those are the more affordable.
well, they were smaller lots, and I mean, from a price point standpoint, they're a little bit less than Cornerstone, probably maybe 10% less, 10 or 15% less than Cornerstone. I think, what did he say, 180?
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm thinking there. But he wants to continue the project. That's what I understood.
Absolutely, he absolutely does, and we'll continue. We already have,
Just
and,
not presented like it was.
I'm sorry?
You're saying he wants to continue the project, but not like it was configured, or?
Well, if he can find a builder that will work with him for the 30 and 40, because of the fact that I think from the value standpoint, he makes more money the more houses he builds. That's why I think builders like that, but also it is just based on where the demand is. So the ones that are the home builders, some of the other home builders that are talking with, that would like the larger lots, suggest that the demand is going to be there for larger lots.
Without it being too personal of a question, just for the fact that we're a commission, was it something we did, or was it something they did? Is it the economy? Do we have a general area that triggered this?
I have heard third hand. He hasn't given me a reason that they backed out, but I've heard third hand that Lennar is a national corporation, that they are expecting that we're going to be going into a recession nationwide, and so they've been put pressure on local projects to kind of cut back in anticipation of that. I don't see a recession from the home building starting here, us being affected by that here, but that is what I heard third hand.
I heard about this a day or so ago, and I read some articles. I think they really have bad leadership. I mean, they're looking at it as an overall economy of the U.S. They're not putting into account that the area from Round Rock to College Station is probably the hottest thing going in the country right now. I think overall they just had bad leadership. So that was my opinion on it.
Nothing that we did. I don't think it was anything that Vargas did.
Yeah, and I understand. We have a few things starting to go for us right now, but if you're looking at a magnifying glass at us, we're still not there yet. We're on the leading edge of the wave. It's coming. You
Well,
said it.
I thought initially before I heard that report that I shared with you that it might have something to do with SLR, that, the SLR was working with them and looking for a commitment to build, 1,000 homes, and, so they didn't want to have that competing against this one. But that's not, that was just my own hypothesis. I didn't, based
you're
on
not the only
anything.
one that have that conspiracy theory.
It's an overall, I think, nationwide issue they had.
So, personal assessment. You think we're still
Yes, it is. The personal assessment is that it is likely just going to slow the project down. Instead of him starting construction in April, it might be August, especially if it has to be replatted and rezoned. If he finds another builder in the next 2 months, or in the next 30 days, he could start in May. But he won't start construction until he has somebody under contract.
Any other questions? All right, action item 5, consider and take any necessary action on a recommendation to the city council regarding a potential amendment to section 14.02.124, conditional use permits. We spoke some last meeting on this. Take it away, sir.
So the commission a couple years ago adopted the allowed use table, and before that happened, this conditional use permit section listed out specific uses that were allowed to come in for a conditional use permit. And what staff has done, I've given you what I've taken out, what I've added, and just to make it easier to read, and then you also have a clean copy at the back, and that would be that way for all the ordinances you see today. The summary of what I've done is I've done two things. I've taken out those uses that are specifically listed and instead of reference to our allowed use table. So that way when you start updating your allowed use table throughout the years, you don't have to update this every time. The second thing that I've done is in this section, you would see it called a conditional use permit at times and then a special use permit at other times. And our code does not define special use permits. It's the same thing as a conditional use permit, but to avoid any confusion, I've just changed that language to be uniform.
So thinking ahead, this is thinking ahead. If we go to the UHD, Unified Code, will this affect that, or should?
So if we do a unified development code,
UDC.
which hopefully one day this community will have, because that is how a lot of cities are starting to move forward, and it will affect your ordinances. Essentially, it affects your building regulations, your zoning code, and if you have a development code, it combines it all into one. So when you have a builder like Philip coming in or someone else, they'll pull up your unified development code, and it will be a one-stop shop for everything that they need to know. You can look at Taylor. They have one, and it's an excellent one if you want to look at one for reference. He's referencing the diagnostic report that's encouraging us to move forward that way, which I would agree. But
I just don't want to kill it twice if we're.
I don't know how far along that is, because that's going to be an expense that is unbudgeted. And so we'll have to start thinking about what that will look like.
Yeah.
And so we'll keep moving forward how we are now. And essentially these amendments aren't done in vain, because once they're in, what a unified development code will have is it will take your existing code and essentially update it and have it all in one spot. So you don't have to cross-reference to different sections of your code like we currently do.
All right, I've muddied the water, so let's go back and clean it up. What do you have before us today?
So this is the conditional use section, and all it's doing is it's taking out the specific listed uses and instead referring to an allowed use table that the commission adopted a couple years ago with council approval. And what that does is it's going to prevent having to update this section every time that staff comes forward with a change to allow another conditional use.
So we'd be changing conditional to special, basically.
Other way around.
Special to conditional.
Special to conditional.
Is there a reason why you couldn't do this all in one instead of having two different items on the agenda?
We could have did it all together in one. We can do it that way for council.
One big, beautiful bill.
Thank you, Rep.
I guess, I'm lost. The table, the list of the conditional use, is that somewhere else, or?
It's going to be in your upcoming sections where we'll talk about the table. This
okay.
this is just a precursor. If you approve it and council approves it, it will start referencing the allowed use table as you need to look there to see what uses require conditional use permits, and then here's our criteria to get approval.
Okay.
And then
And so for ease of council understanding what we're dealing with, you recommend this change?
I'll make a motion for approval of the ordinance amendment.
I'll second it. Looks like it's a good process.
We have a motion to approve it and pass it on to council. I have a second. All those in favor, right hand. Motion made, seconded, and carries. All righty then. Number 6, consider and take any necessary action on a recommendation to the city council regarding potential amendment to section 14.02.072, allowed use table for mini storage warehouses.
All right, so at our last meeting, the commission expressed interest in requiring the mini storage warehouses to obtain a conditional use permit instead of being allowed by right. So I have highlighted it within your allowed use table if you want to see that. What you'll see is that we've just changed the X's that represent allowed by right to C's for conditional use instead. You'll also notice some other changes within the allowed use table on both. I've cleaned up, we referenced it as S's in the past as a special use permit, but for uniformity, I've changed it to C's for conditional use permits. And then there was one section that we double referenced, you'll see highlighted in red. I've just removed it because you reference it in another spot the exact same way. And so it doesn't need to be doubled up. But as far as this ordinance amendment, the only difference is instead of X's on the allowed use table to allow mini storage warehouses by right, is you're going to require a conditional use permit that they'll have to present to council for approval.
So,
That's what we asked for last time.
yeah, under agricultural, the animal shelter, public or private, is conditional, suggested conditional. I'm sorry, third page. Under, agricultural.
Yeah, and so that was S's originally. So that's how you guys had it. You had it as an S or special use, so I've just changed it.
So basically, we've done away with the S's, we've gone with
It's just,
C's.
it's C's. So I just wanted you to see that I've changed it. I haven't changed any of the allowed by right or conditional use / special uses. I've just uniformed it to a C. The only things that I've changed is highlighted in yellow. Those are the only changes to the table. And then the highlighted in red is going to be removed because it's double referenced.
And when we go conditional permit, is there a permit fee associated?
There is in our fee schedule, I believe. There's a fee.
Questions? And the red area you reference is in the, next to the last page.
It should be within there somewhere. If not, we need to add it as a C.
I make a motion of approval of the ordinance amendment. Changing the special to conditional, initials, and X's, and removing the part that was repeated.
Read it back, what do you say?
Come on, Chairman.
We got a motion made. I need a second to proceed.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded, that we approve, pass it on to city council. All those in favor, right hand. Motion made, seconded, and carries. Number 6, consider and take any necessary action on a recommendation to the city council regarding a potential amendment to section 14.02.072, allowed use table for mini storage warehouses.
You'll want to read the one after that. We just did that one.
just did that one.
I don't know why that looks like I just said that.
You wanna borrow my sweater?
Yeah, no, I need what you got in the car, in the back seat of the car, if you wouldn't mind bringing it in. Consider and take any necessary action on a recommendation to the city council regarding potential amendment to 14.02.004 definitions, and section 14.02.072 allowed use table by adding personal professional services as an allowed use.
So the first thing that staff did is you have to define the use before you add it to the table with the use of that is that broad. And so it's the same definition that I read off last time, which I'll read again in case you want to change it. It is a healthcare service provided directly to an individual by a licensed professional focusing on personalized assessment, diagnosis, treatment, and management of their health conditions. And then I've included a couple examples that are estheticians, am I saying that right? Speech and occupational therapists, and dietary counselors, and more.
Can we make it easier for the city council to understand? It might be a little complex.
And then in your table, you'll see highlighted in yellow, there's 2 sections we've added it to. The first is we've added it to a home occupation section in the allowed use table, and in that section it requires conditional use permits for approval. And then the commission expressed that it would be allowed by right in commercial, so there will be another section that you'll see highlighted in yellow deeper on into the allowed use table, that it is allowed by right in the C1, C2, CA, and I district.
Residential has to come before.
All home occupations have to come before the council for their conditional use permit. Mhm.
This is what we talked about last meeting, but now we just,
That's right. Now it's actually in the form that you could approve it and recommend it to council.
remember that, Bob?
Yep. And I said that kind of just about council, but in that recommendation, they're trying to tell us to make it simplified too, if we go that route.
Yeah, what that definition does is it's broad, but it defines it. So it defines that you have to be licensed, so somebody can't come in without a license and say they want to run this home business as a personal professional service. And then it gives you the definition, it has to be for healthcare. And then it gives you a couple of uses as an idea, and it adds the and more, so council can make that discretion when they come in for a conditional use permit.
And when we
That it
talked
would
about when they
qualify.
come in, that's how they get on the radars, coming in, get the permit from you to,
Yeah, they would have to get a certificate of occupancy if they're going to run that business, and that so they would come to my office as development services, and then I would let them know at that point that I cannot approve that. The city council will have to give you a conditional use permit.
questions.
I recommend we approve the ordinance amendment. Move it on to council? Or do we move it on to the council or just stay here? Is it
Nope,
fine?
this will go to council
Okay.
if y'all recommend
It'll
approval,
probably be under consent agenda.
and then they will have 2 readings of that.
What do you reckon? Approval?
We recommend approval,
Approval.
yes. Yeah, staff recommends approval of this.
What's the negative? We're just filling a void. We're aware that this
Yeah,
is
the only
not-
negative is you might be giving council a little bit more work with conditional use permits, but other than that, you've protected yourself from allowing a use by right, but still giving the option for somebody to come in and apply for that use.
We said the last time, so we'll know what's going on in our neighborhoods instead of people just running businesses.
Yeah. So you already have a home occupation code that is pretty strong that says they can't create more traffic. It has to keep a residential aesthetic. You're covered on that base. All you're doing with this ordinance is allowing a personal professional service use to request a conditional use permit from council.
And you made a motion?
Yes, sir.
So we're waiting on a second?
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second to approve and pass on to city council. All those in favor, right hand. Motion made, seconded, and carries on to city council. Consider and take any necessary action on a recommendation to the city council regarding a potential amendment to section 14.02.123, sign requirements.
Okay, this is a lengthy one because we did not get to talk about this last time because of time restraints. And so we'll go over it together and you can stop me wherever you want to dive deeper into it. So I will just make a note to the commission that you'll see the redlined ordinance. There was a small couple of changes that will be different from the clean copy of the ordinance, and I'll try to highlight them as we go on forth. But on the first page, what I've done is remove the original purpose and just crafted it to be a little bit smaller but contain more information, which is just stating the purpose of why you have a sign code. To be brief, is to identify your businesses in residential neighborhoods. You want to ensure that they're compatible with adjacent properties. You want to regulate the environment for residents, businesses, and visitors. And then you just want to ensure that they're consistent with your adopted comprehensive plan.
I see you put in quite a bit of work. Did you compare this with other
Yes,
communities?
I did. And so on the last, there was a community, and I cannot recall their name at the moment. I'll get it to you guys. But on the last one, I told you guys they had a very strong sign ordinance. That was most of our reference. We cross-referenced with a couple other communities for some other sign illumination standards. And I'll get you guys those if you like them. After that, you'll see I removed quite a bit. And then we go into the definitions where we've had to define a lot of things that we've added. And so a couple highlights on this is we've added the electronic message sign that we were currently silent on that is starting to become more popular. We've added a definition for foot candles because that is going to be one of the ways that we measure how the sign affects adjacent properties. And then I've also, you'll see as we go farther in, we have a highway sign and then we have a non-highway sign. And so we had to define what a highway sign meant. And so what I put in there is that it's any lots or tracks that have frontage along Cameron, US 79, FM 487, or FM 908. And then you'll see later on in the non-highway, the way we define that is any signage that does not front the same roads that I just specified. We've added in monolith signs and monument signs in the definitions because that's what this community is proposing to allow. We're no longer proposing to allow for freestanding / pole signage that currently exists in our code.
Question. I probably should look the pictures up on this monolith and,
I have some examples for you.
there we go. You gonna
Yeah,
show it?
I will. When we
There
get to
we go.
that section, I'll show it to you guys. I figured you'd want to see what staff has added if it's actually something you want your community to have or not. So I've given you some examples.
Cool.
And then after that, it's just a lot of definitions. And so then we move into section E, which I have it as general provisions. I've changed that in the clean copy to general requirements since we already have a general provisions that was earlier on. And what it says is it said you can't put up a new sign without obtaining a permit, that the sign has to identify their primary use or primary service on the property. The sign should meet the standards of the building code. On section 4, this is one that's new, is we don't allow them to blink, flash, or have pulsing lights or messages that attract attention away from drivers is essentially what that goal is trying to do. We also don't allow signs
Is
to be...
scrolling considered the same as blink or flash?
Scrolling's different, but later on we'll get to it. We have a standard of what we're going to allow for that. On number 5, we prohibit them from being erected on trees, bridges, or fences unless we specify otherwise. Towers, utility poles, automobiles and vehicles, and/or junk vehicles. And then we allow each property in the city to have one detached sign, which I'll specify later on what those detached signs are that we will allow. We require that any sign that we don't specify in another section to have a 5-foot setback. And then here's the new standard that are proposed. Any illuminated sign shall not operate at a brightness level of more than 0.3 foot candles above the current light condition at the property line. So 0.2 is about moonlight, for reference. Any questions on that section before we move forward? Any comments?
The automobiles or vehicles, I know outside of town we had a vehicle with like signs. That's what this is talking about
Yeah.
somewhat. And then the automobiles, like what do you mean by that as far as signs on automobiles?
So it would be not to call them out, but Dun Right Roof does it, where they have either a trailer or a fire truck at places that contain their advertisement. They'll park it there for advertising purposes. That's what that's really targeting.
Is it leaving like it there for a certain amount of time, or?
So temporary signage is allowed, which is specified in this, but we don't allow it for it to be permanent. So a business can come in and then park the fire truck there for months at a time. They'd have to remove that.
Okay.
It wouldn't include somebody that had a vehicle that had their logo on the vehicle that they just came and parked in their parking lot and then.
Right, so
Yeah.
not no permanent parking, leaving it there for.
Right.
Okay.
For the intention of advertising
Okay.
the business for a long period of time. Yeah, if you happen to drive a company vehicle with a sign on it, right, and you go get food at the temporary sign, I mean,
What about, there's an example I can use, but I don't think I ought to do it, but there's a vehicle that has a canvas sign that advertises a business parked in a parking lot.
yeah. What this section is targeting is a permanent signage. So whether the sign is actually attached to the vehicle or if it's a wrap that you'll put over the vehicle, anything that's
Set in place.
right set in place, advertising a business, whether it's that business on the lot or it's another business that is just advertising and they have an off-premise location somewhere else.
And then the fence, so if they have a sign on the fence, that's not allowed?
That's
that
what
what
this
you're
is
saying?
proposing, yeah, is that
Okay.
you wouldn't put your signage on a fence. So you'll have attached signage, so you'll have like, think of wall signs and projection signs. What this is saying is you can't put that on the fence. If you're gonna have an attached sign, it's gotta be on your building.
Kind of like how JH had this, sign over here on that fence off the highway?
Yeah,
Is that
so
what you're talking
that's gonna be a little different. So he did work for somebody, so they're just, saying he did a good job on my fence, here's a sign temporarily. But what this goes referencing is if he had an office and he wanted to put an attached sign, he could not put a permanent attached sign on the fence. It would have to be on the building.
about? Okay.
Any other questions on that section?
So with the pole signs, I'll let you explain this better. Why are we trying to do away with pole signs exactly?
So the council expressed interest on that, and so they've tasked staff with removing them. So this is the workshop. We can add them back, but we cannot. That is purely going to be the council discretion, but they are the ones that actually told us to remove them.
The last couple of variants we've received requests regarding signs, we've gotten direction that they were approved conditional that they make the monument sign rather than a pole sign.
That was from council.
Yeah.
That stemmed over a poll type highway advertising, and a business wanted to put a sign out there, but it
It was-
contradicted our, we can only have one.
Yeah, one of them was that way. One was it was too bright, and so they came in. And so since council is setting that precedent, and they directly told staff to make that update, that's why we proposed to remove them. They can be added back in at council discretion or at planning commission discretion, but that's why staff's moved forward that way. As well as you'll see another amendment that we will allow attached signage to go 2 foot above the roof line because council has set that precedent of granting 2 variances that were above roof lines. So we're just trying to get in line so that way you don't have to see variance requests over and over again for the same topic.
And I think the reason for that is just from an aesthetic standpoint, a lot of cities are moving away from pole signs just because it creates a less cluttered streetscape. As you drive down the highway, it makes it more attractive generally overall. Existing pole signs would be legally non-conforming, grandfathered.
So that's gonna regulate a landowner leasing property to, I can't think of the name right offhand, to do the big board signs.
So you're talking about billboards.
Right.
No, currently our sign code doesn't allow for new billboards anyways,
Okay.
because how a lot of cities deal with it is they go on a square footage basis. So you can't really directly say you don't allow billboards, but what you can do is require them to be a smaller size, which is smaller than a billboard. That's how our city does it, and that's how a lot of other cities will do it. And
And they also address off-site advertising.
yeah, our code references off-site advertising, and you'll see it on the next section below. I've changed the word freestanding to just detached signage for uniform, and I've added the language of no off-premise signage is permitted. That's already in our code. I've just moved it in a section for the permitted signs, so that way it would be quicker reference instead of being at the end of our ordinance.
Where are you at exactly?
I'm on the new section F, signs permitted. And so you'll see the last sentence, it says no off-premise signage is allowed. And then before that, I have not changed the number of signs you allow, so we can discuss that if you want. We allow currently 1 detached sign, and then we allow 4 signs attached to the building.
So, Mr. Geddes Plaza, the sign advertises multiple businesses. Is that a multi-lot shared sign, or is that a pole sign?
So what they currently have is defined as a multi-tenant freestanding sign, is what Gaddy's has. The way that this new ordinance proposes, we'll get into that section, but there is actually a multi-tenant sign. I'm trying to think of what we call it here. A multi-tenant monument sign is what we would propose for plazas and things of that nature. And we'll get to that section, and I'll show you all the examples to see what you think about it. But that's how the ones that are on poles typically will have 2 poles, and then It's almost like a rectangle is a multi-tenant freestanding sign. That's how we currently define it.
Monument sign, multi-tenant. Is
So
it-
let's get into the detached sign section. Shane, can you pull up the PowerPoint for us? And I'll have examples as we get into this section, and we really need to discuss these in depth because I proposed some different things that you may have not seen before. So the first is monument signs. It's typically on a masonry base. And what we proposed, the first is you'll want to reference table 1B. And so remember the definitions of highway and non-highway signs. You'll see that this is consistent, that the non-highway signage is going to be smaller than the highway signage. Typically because your non-highway signage may be in more of a mixed-use type of area where there's going to be residential around you more often than residential will be around you in the highway. And so what we propose is the maximum square footage for highway monument signs is 70, and for non-highway it's 50. And then the gross surface area, which is the whole sign, is 90 for highway and 70 for non-highway.
The sign that you're showing the picture, is that a,
Non-highway?
That is most likely on a highway. And so do you have the?
That would
oh,
be
I have it
about
later.
14 by 8, wouldn't it?
So this sign here, so when we talk about sign surface area, it's this section here that is just the sign that is advertising,
Not the base.
not the
line.
base. So this is what we would require to be 70 square foot or lower currently. And then if you take the whole sign, then we would only require it to be 90 or smaller on highway signs. We would only allow it to be 14-foot width on highways and 12-foot on non-highway. And then the height is the same for both, where we would allow it to be 8-foot.
8 foot just the sign? Or is that
The whole-
8 foot
the whole-
piece?
the
Okay.
whole thing.
Okay.
And so after that, before we get into questions about that, because I'm sure you have some, that ordinance I was referencing had an interesting piece in it that I liked, that if you set your sign farther back, you can get in intervals of making your sign a little bit bigger. So the way that it works is if you go to table 1C1, on highway signs, we'll start with that one, you can go up to 5 additional square feet for your sign every 1 foot that you set it back, up to 100 square foot max. They do set a maximum so that way you don't get a really big sign. What that will do is, the hopes of that is to unclutter your highways. Make them push it back a little bit farther if you want your bigger sign, more in the parking lot type of area, and then you can have up to 100 square foot sign. And then it goes the same with
This also has to conform to our setback at intersections.
right, it will. And so you have a sign setback of 5. For this section, we say that it'll be 10. For monument signs, they got to set back a little bit farther. But this is, yes, you have what Doug's referring to as just a site visibility triangle that we've adopted. You cannot put a sign in the site visibility triangle no matter what any section says. That section, a section cannot contradict another section.
We worked hard on that, man.
Yes. And so that's the idea of that, is if you want a bigger sign, then you can start setting that back farther than 10 feet, and you'll get these intervals to a certain extent. Is there any questions, any comments about this size before we talk about the expected design of monument signs? And then I have a couple more other examples if you want to see. I have 2 more. There's that one that they've incorporated in the base. And then there's one other one that is mostly a sign with not much of a base, but that's still a monument sign.
How'd you come up with the 8s and like the 8 foot like other towns?
Yeah, the one with the strong sign code had an 8-foot, which seems reasonable. Because the point of monument signs is for them not to reach very high in the air.
Right.
And so, 8 foot is about, it's going to be smaller than a house. It can increase, it can decrease on how you choose. I've seen some that do just 6 foot max height, but the more common is 8. And so that's why I've included it in ours. Any questions about
Well,
the
I was even
intervals?
thought going, you start catching wind and all that, we don't want to get specific on making sure they're on a solid foundation. That it
Well,
wasn't-
you actually specify that, and so that's part of your building code. And then there's also a section that you have to make sure that's built to wind loads and different requirements. That's like when anybody comes in with the permit application when they want to build a house. I'll use that example. The permit requester signs off that they know what your codes are and they know what your adopted codes are. And so adopted codes, when somebody comes and builds a house, they know that we have the 2018 International Code Council codes. They're responsible for meeting that code. So if they install something and we inspect it and it is against the code, they would have to correct it to that standard. You don't have to continue to specify that standard anytime you make ordinance amendments.
Do we need to add a link at any portion of this in here to see that code or anything?
No? Typically you don't. I mean, we can if you want. If you want to put in a section that says, you're subject to meeting the International 2018 codes or the currently adopted building codes of the City of Rockdale. However you want to handle that. Typically, you won't continue to cross-reference for the sole fact that every time you cross-reference, when you change an ordinance, you have to change multiple ordinances. Any comments on the intervals? Is that an idea that you want to C, do you want to remove that and just say it's straightforward? This is how much we're going to allow. You have to meet a 10-foot setback. You can set it farther back if you want, but we're not going to give you an interval. The idea is to encourage them to set it farther back.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm sorry, guys, I'm blurting that out, but I'm good with
Th-
that.
This is a lot, and
I
so
think it's
this,
a good idea.
this is one of those, we can have multiple workshops on this. This doesn't have to go to council next month because we didn't get to talk about this the first time. But I just
I've
want to
been in
be,
cities where you can't see the oncoming traffic at an intersection just because of the sign
yeah,
being obtrusive, but,
yeah.
so I like that. So it's just Doug Williams talking here, but I'm good with that. I don't want it right up to the sidewalk.
Yeah, so currently we say 5, and that's why I've specified it, just in case there's any section that we miss in the future. It just will automatically, you have a 5. And then if we specify differently, like we do in this section that says 10, then you have a 10, because you're doing a monument sign, and the monument sign section requires a 10-foot setback.
So how did Cornerstone address theirs? I'm good with what they did. I'm just.
Well, it's the same as Dollar Tree. They asked for monument sign regulations for them to install, and we gave them a section that did not really apply to monument signs. It gave them an idea, but there wasn't really a way to regulate that effectively.
And this takes care of it.
This
something
would add
we
it to your
learned.
code, yeah. So I mean, if as Councilmember Starnes said, if you want to put pole signs allowed back in the code, you can, and we can just specify what the standard is that you want to see. But what this is doing is it's adding new signage to your code that is more popular and what cities are more referring to now.
We'll let our liaison bring that up at the city council meeting. I prefer to leave it like it is.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and leave those intervals in for now. The other thing that I want to talk to you about on the monument sign section before we move on is the design. If you go to section F, which is a couple pages down,
Just above table 2B.
just above table 2B, we require that it has to be a minimum of 40% solid masonry. It also adds the options of stone, brick, and/or stucco to match the buildings that's on the lot. And then we add a subsection in there that if they're proposing to use an equivalent material than what was listed above, then it can be approved by the city manager, or if he designates that to somebody else, then they can approve that. Any questions on the design? With none, the other items that we added is the lighting, that we will allow them to be eternally illuminated if they choose, or they can actually put a light on the ground and angle it up at the sign if they want. Remember that earlier in this section, they're going to be subject to that 0.3-foot candles at the property line. So however they choose to light their sign up, a measurement will be done at their property line to ensure that it's not above 0.3-foot candles. And then after that, on H, that you'll see this a couple times, it's just a protection more for the city side. If somebody installs a sign in an unknown public utility easement, which shouldn't happen, but it could happen, that the owner is going to be responsible for removing the sign and relocating it. Any questions about monument signs before we move on to monolith signs?
Do the light have to start at the 5-foot setback? Or
The
is it
light,
just a sign?
it's just the sign. But typically when you see a light, it's going to be installed pretty close to the sign base because it's going to illuminate the sign. And so the closer it is to the sign base, you'll get more of an illumination than if you backed it up, typically.
And what you just said is if they build the sign or put it up and it's not in conforming with the code, then they'll be responsible for moving.
If they put it in a public utility easement, so imagine it's over a water line,
Okay.
and somebody comes in and says, hey, you're in our water line easement, then it's not going to be the responsibility of whoever that provider is. If it's us or if it's a gas line, they're not going to remove the sign for that business. They're going to have to remove it themselves, and then they're going to have to put one back subject to all their own expenses because they put it in the easement. And the only thing allowed in easements, just FYI, is fencing. Nothing else can be allowed to be put in an easement. So that's the monument sign section. Those were the examples given on what they could potentially look like. That third sign's most likely not going to meet your requirement unless they got a variance from council for the 40% that we require, but the other two are going to be more ideal signs that you're probably going to see in your community. The next section is going to be the monolith sign. And so monolith signs are going to be a lot less width on them, but they'll be taller typically. These are more the thought process of what you'll see instead of pole signs on the highway. They'll have to put a monolith sign instead. And so on table 2B, we specify what the requirements are. Again, we break it down by highway and non-highway. So we'll allow for a 70 square foot maximum sign on a highway and 50 square foot on non-highways. And then the whole surface area of the sign can be 110 square foot, while non-highways are 80. The width is going to be 8 foot for both.
That's what he's talking about,
Yeah.
monolith, multi-tenant.
Yeah, this is an example of a multi-tenant one. They have multiple tenants within that space listed off. And then that's what the multi-tenant monument sign will look like when we get to that section. So those are the ways that you'll handle, instead of having multi-tenant freestanding, you still give the option And then we do specify two different heights. So on the highway, a monolith sign can reach up to 14 foot. And then on non-highways, it can be 10 foot. And then again, we have two tables that list the allowance, the farther that you set back the sign from what you're required, which in this section we require a 10-foot setback as well. You'll gain a certain ratio of allowing your sign to be a little bit bigger, up to 120 square foot max for the sign surface area, then 160 for gross surface area for highway. And then they could reach up to a height of 20 feet if they set it back far enough as their maximum. And then their width would remain the same at 8, no matter how far they set back that sign.
And that's table 2C2.
2C1. 2C2 is going to be your non-highway monolith signs. They can reach up to 70 square foot max if you set it back far enough, 100 square foot gross surface area, and then a height of 10 foot. Again, the purpose of that is to encourage your sign installers to set that sign farther back instead of being 10 foot. Ask them to have it 15 foot and you'll get this certain allowance.
Since I'm horrible at math, how far back does someone have to go to get the maximum allowable sign?
5 square feet on the highway is 5 square feet per 1 foot of setback. So if they went back 10 feet, if they went back 20 feet, they'd be able to, 100 square feet signage.
Because it does end.
No, I'm sorry.
Right, exactly. But,
So-
you know, what is that distance that gets them the full
Well, let me
tax
tell you.
value?
Are you all talking about highway or non-highway, Bob?
Well, mainly highway at this point.
Yeah.
So they would have to go back to 20 foot setback
Okay.
to reach their maximum on a monolith sign.
So, you know,
So
so
instead of-
basically double
double
the
the setback to
the
get your-
fullest,
yeah.
Okay, cool.
And so that's the idea of that section. If there's no questions on that, we also, it's a similar design as monuments. We require 40% to be solid masonry, stone, or stucco. And now here's a different one that we require monolith signs, but not monument signs. We require them to have some sort of architectural accent to that. It gives some examples that you can do a roof canopy to resemble a tower or arched metalwork to cap the sign. It's going to be, each one has a unique architectural component that they would submit on their permit application.
Is that canopy or architectural feature included in the total height?
It is not. I don't believe. I'll have to double check. We do need to specify that though. Do you want, imagine if somebody, I think I have an example on one of the monolith signs. I thought, go the other way. Keep going. Go to the second one. So this triangle here that sticks out could be something that you would allow within that. That would be an architectural feature. Because if you go back to the first one, Shanna, this is just a rectangle. And so what the point of this is to try to make this a little bit more aesthetically pleasing than somebody just putting tall rectangles up, to add a little bit more to it. It's what that community did that I referenced, that we use the sign code for a lot of this, is they require an architectural component. They left it open for the applicant to install one that they would like. You can be specific if you'd like on how you'd like to see that.
So that's under double I, the architectural
Yes.
accent?
Yep. So that is the intent. It's essentially to make a more interesting looking sign than just a rectangle. We can take that out if you think that's a little too much for what we would be asking for, but we purposely left it open as they have the ability to apply for something that they would like on their sign rather than requiring it to look a certain way.
Do we need to add anything about upon, must be approved by, or anything like that?
If you want it to be approved by council, you can. If you want it to be like how we referenced in the other section where the city manager would approve that or their designee, you can do that. Because currently how it's written is it would just be they would apply, and if it met that requirement according to whomever's issuing your permits, if it's your permit technician, city planner, whoever, then they would have that discretion of if that is an architectural accent or not, which is typically pretty straightforward.
Tim, what do you encounter in other cities regarding that?
It doesn't have to go to council. It can always be, any decision that I make in that regard can be appealed to council, to overrule me, but,
So do we need to add verbiage to, by city manager, or?
if I denied something, they could appeal it to council.
If you want the city manager to have the approval, we can add that in there. Anything in your sign code that you'll see later on can be appealed to the city council if they feel that they were wrongfully denied, or if they want to request a variance, they can appeal to council.
I'm just thinking in worst terms, somebody puts up,
Yeah, so currently how this is written is it would just be an application. They would come in, your staff member would look at it. Does it have an architectural accent to it? If not, it's denied, and they can appeal. If it does, then it will be approved.
you're happy with that much bite? The teeth, that much, are you happy? We don't need to add verbiage that we don't need is where I'm going, but
I think that with the council's direction that they want to see more appealing signs, and so an element like this is not too much for staff to handle. It is pretty straightforward, and it allows room for you to come in with the design that you want your sign to look like. It doesn't require you to have to meet a certain design standard that may not match your building and how you want your development to look.
Understood. Questions? Did I mess everybody up? Okay.
The only concern that I might have regarding this is if you had a development, a retail strip development that had 12 different stores in it, the height is going to be really important because of the fact that when you get the lettering too small, it's not going to be worth having a sign at all. If you want to try to list all of those, they may need more space on the sign depending upon the size of the development. So you might need some kind of language in there that stipulates based on a ratio of the size could also be tied to the size of the development.
Well, that's what they've done there in order to get everybody in that. They actually did two.
Yeah, I mean, you can, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can do like what Tim said, where you can have a ratio that you can add to your multi-tenant signs, where,
Would that be allowed to have two freestanding signs like that? Or
No.
would that be considered- They would actually have to do maybe one monument to two, and make it into one sign.
yeah.
I guess you could do it that way. But there's not a width limitation on this sign. Did you notice that?
There is,
Yeah.
you're on the increments, go to the previous page. Your
One
width
is
is at the
width and one
bottom.
is height.
Yeah, he was looking at the
On
increments.
are you talking about on the monolith or here?
On the monolith,
Well, we're fixing to get, hang on, yeah, we're gonna get into multi-tenant, hang on, I may jump the gun totally on that deal.
yeah, because the tables you're seeing, Tim, is if they set their sign farther back, they get these increments to go by with the maximum. So we're encouraging them to set their signs farther back off of their property lines.
This is the actual,
And the first table is the actual maximums if they were to only meet the required setback of 10.
okay. So they get 8 feet, they're 8 feet in width and there's no allowance.
Right, there's no increase to that width.
Thank you, ma'am, for coming to our meeting today.
They could go to 14 all the way up to 20 on the highway and.
Yeah. To continue on the design, we added the same language. If they're proposing to use a different material, then they can ask the city manager for approval on that regard.
Is that all metal monument right there? Is that what I'm looking at? With a masonry bottom?
I can't tell what this material is with it. If that's, I'm not sure.
On these numbers, real quick, Ben.
Uh-huh.
So this says 12 foot is height if it's 1 foot per setback, and it's 14 foot is the maximum height over here.
There's two different signs. You're looking at monument signs on that table. Those are the monument signs, maximum allowances, and the monolith sign table is those.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Same thing, we allow them to be internally illuminated to the standard that was set forth of the 0.3 foot candles. And then we also specify that if they put it in the easement, they're responsible for removing it and relocating that sign appropriately. And that's the end of the monolith sign section.
On what Tim was saying, so if you have a bigger space, are you asking like for a bigger sign possibly, depending on the square footage of the area?
Yeah, for instance, where the meat market and the
The plaza area?
yeah, that plaza, I don't know how many,
Taylor Bank Plaza.
if it was full, how many businesses would go in there?
Oh, man, yeah.
Well, and I'll tell you that they could use a different type of sign. And so when we get into this multi-tenant monument signs, those are actually going to allow for a bigger sign. I'll read the section to you. They're allowed a total of no more than 140 square foot for their sign.
12 by 12-ish.
And then they'll get the same increments. It's not a table form this time, but they can go up to a maximum of 200 square foot for the sign. And then their gross surface area could go to a maximum of 300 square foot. So if you have a bigger plaza, they would most likely be coming in
That'd be
with
like
a,
outlet malls and places like that.
yeah,
site.
they'll most likely come in with a multi-tenant monument sign. And if that's not enough for them, they can always come in for a variance request. I would be hesitant on adding a bigger size this, because then you'll have people take advantage of using that bigger size that you would allow and maybe not have as many tenants.
Because of
Right.
multi-tenant definition by its.
And so the maximum height that we would allow for a multi-tenant monument sign, it can be no taller than 20 foot. If they set back in increments, then it can reach a maximum of 30. And then we also require that the multi-tenant center name has to be displayed, and it can't be greater than 40 square foot. And then the maximum width would be 16 foot on those.
What size sign am I looking at right now? On the overhead.
I couldn't tell you.
Question.
Yeah.
Awning signs, it says, awning signs shall not project more than 1 foot from the awning, so it has to be like no more than 1 foot next to the next awning sign?
Yeah, we'll get to that
Okay.
on that section, but yes. So your multi-tenant monument sign is most likely what these plazas are going to come in with. We did not specify a multi-tenant monolith sign, as I haven't seen any of those off the top of my head other than that one, which we could allow if you'd like that to be allowed. If you want them to have more than a monument sign option, then we can look into that. If
Say that again. We have the option of,
if you want them to have the option of a monolith sign for multi-tenant centers,
oh, yeah.
then you could create one. We don't have one created currently. We're pretty much limiting them to monument signs only, and that they would have to display the name. So you see that they display the plaza name here. That's what we're asking for, and then they would list who's in their plaza. There'd be a percentage of this that would be masonry, like we say, in the design standard. The design standard, the only difference from the other ones is we require multi-tenants to be 50% masonry, stone, brick, or stucco to match the building. Again, they can ask the city manager for approval on a similar material to the building if those don't need it.
That's a way to get 50%.
Yeah. Yeah, I've tried to include a lot of different signs so you can see different examples. I think there's one more. Is not? Okay. I also included one that wouldn't be allowed, and I don't remember which one it was, but we'll get there when we get there. But those are different examples of what you can see, so just to give you an idea of what this code is trying to do.
And that is measured from which side, the height of that sign? Center?
The height of that sign would be measured at the base of the grade, so it would be that farthest point down. Unless you have someone that would appeal otherwise, that's how I would measure it. But that sign's not going to meet the setback anyways,
Yeah,
because you have
that
the road
sounds-
here, and the sidewalk right here, so there may be a 1 foot setback. So I mean, in our community, that's not, you can't install a sign there anyways.
The setback is from the sidewalk or from the?
The setback is from property lines, so most likely their property line is somewhere in this area, I would imagine.
So that's 0 setback.
Yeah, it probably doesn't even have a setback, because the sidewalk is going to be, depends what community you're in. Sometimes there's an additional foot after the sidewalk. Sometimes the sidewalk is the end of your right of way.
I don't see any taller lines.
Any questions on multi-tenant monument signs, since we were discussing the plaza centers? That's the goal of of when you would see those. It's pretty much only going to be in a plaza, typically.
And there's no need to regulate any kind of lighting or anything like that?
So we do, we require that there's only 0.3 foot candles at the property
Okay.
line. We'll get into electronic signs here in a minute because we have another standard that we're going to use. And so they're allowed, the same as the other, you can do an internally illuminated sign. You can put some lights on the ground and point them upwards at the sign. It's going to be the same standard as 0.3 foot candles at the property line is what you're allowed.
Is there a point you want to get to today? Do you want to get all the way through this, or?
I think we can make it all the way through. I'll make it quick. The last type of detached sign is a retaining wall sign. If you go to the next slide, Shanna. It's just signage on a retaining wall. It really is just that simple. And so what we ask is that it has no greater than 40 square foot. And then they can apply to up to 100 square foot to the planning commission. And that would be your recommendation to council at that point if you would like that to be a greater sign than that. They're allowed one per property. Now this setback is a little bit different, so let me read it to you. Retaining wall signs are subject to a 0 foot setback if the retaining wall is less than or equal to 5 feet in height. If it's taller than that, then they're required to be 10 foot away from the property line.
On that one, it actually is a split wall. Would it be from ground below that smaller section, or would it be from grade?
So your measurements are always done from grade. So it would be the grade, because this is going to be part of their signage. So it would be the grade upwards. They've just added an accent where they've allowed some gardening to happen here, but this is all part of the retaining wall sign.
And only one per
They're
property?
allowed one retaining wall sign per property. You're allowed one detached sign regardless. You can choose how you do that. So you'd be allowed one retaining wall sign, so you could do a sign similar to this.
So if you had a whole block, there's no,
Like Cornerstone, if they had a sign on this side and a sign on the other side, they could do that?
Not supposed to. We can allow more than one if you'd like to, or you can keep it at one and have people come in for a variance request.
so there's still a variance option on it?
There's always a variance option.
Okay.
It's at the end of this ordinance. You can ask for an appeal if you feel that a staff member denied your application for a wrongdoing, or you can apply for a variance if staff says, your sign's a little bit too big. They can ask for a variance. It's at the discretion of the council to approve that or not.
So, give me a little knowledge here. The sign is to note the property, to announce the property. It's not to announce an entrance
Right.
or major exit or anything like that. It's just one sign because we want to announce what the location is.
Right. This is regulating your signage that is for the advertisement of business. It's not to regulate your signage of entrances and exits. You'll see later on that there's sections of signs that we don't regulate, and I believe that's one of them. That's all. It's typically one of them. You don't regulate real estate signs typically. You don't regulate political signs. You don't regulate traffic signs, things like that. You're more into advertisement for business is what you're going to usually regulate. And so when it says one detached sign, that's what it means. You can only put one sign for Windstar Roofing on your property. You can put an entrance and exit sign that's not going to count, but you can only advertise your business one time detached, and then you can have up to 4 attached to the building. There are temporary signs that don't require a permit. Currently, it's how the code has it. I didn't change that. That's the detached sign section. We can end it there, and we can get into attached signs at another meeting, since that is a lot of information.
Say move to another meeting.
Do you
Only
want
have
us to
15
submit
minutes.
a presentation to city council like that also, or you would
No.
prefer us to have it as one?
Yeah, we need to have it as one, because you may change something when we get into the attached sign, or y'all may go home and read this tonight, because I just threw a lot of information at you, and you might find something that doesn't quite make sense that you'd like to see changed later on.
We'll have 2 readings on the ordinance.
Yeah. So this is really kind of like our workshop on this, since we didn't have time last time. So this is,
Say move forward. I mean, good to next meeting, so we can make sure we're not rushing through it. And
it is a lot. I'm fine with
just
that.
wondering, if time is my only, I'm good, but,
If you have more questions about detached signs between now and next meeting,
yeah, we'd like a second reading kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can leave this in here, Ben. It'll be here next time still.
Yeah, you're gonna have the same amendment. Yeah.
Okay.
I won't change anything to it unless y'all, unless I find something. I'll tell y'all at the next meeting. Like, I already noticed one spelling error that's gonna have to change. But other than that, But if y'all want to reach out to me individually, not to create a quorum, if y'all want to go over it, we can. But we'll have another meeting on it.
But before we close out, did you include the removal of signs by any chance?
That section's still in there.
Okay.
You're pretty much the end of your ordinance. I haven't changed. You'll see that. I've left a lot of that the same because it was perfectly fine how it was.
I was in San Antonio and businesses closed and they still leave the signs up and it's aggravating,
I'll have to look if we require that. I know we require signs to remain in good condition, but I don't know if we require like a closed business to remove their sign from the building or not. I don't believe we do, but I could be wrong.
Cardinal, did they move?
They shut down is what I've heard, and so they're leasing the space. And I don't know. I think they just moved out of town. I think they're still a business. I just don't think they're in Rockdale anymore.
Yeah, I think they're in Round Rock or that area.
I see they cleaned the Vikes automotive signs down. That's up to the property owner, right? Most likely.
Yeah.
That's what I've always thought.
It's property owners that would, just like if it's a code enforcement issue really. If they have a sign that's in ditch repair, they would get a notice that they need to repair the sign or remove it. Just like a code enforcement letter would give you for high grass. It's a very similar process.
You got 8 minutes. What would you like to do?
That's it for me. I mean, if y'all want to review that, I would recommend reviewing that on your own because it is a lot, and I can only go so in depth in this time frame that we have. And then if you have comments, send them to me before the meeting, and then poll to see if we can make a workshop happen or not. If not, then we'll have to put this back on the regular schedule for May.
We
Yeah.
got Rockdale Junior High Track Meet District today in Thrall, and Rockdale High School District Track Meet in Rockdale tomorrow.
Gotta make a decision, Charlotte. What's more important to you?
Both of them. He sent me up there.
Any other questions before we go?
When do we schedule it?
We have the option of,
Well, it depends when you can make a quorum, to be quite honest with you. If you can make a quorum on the workshop, then we can have this on the workshop and get through it, and then have a recommendation to council at their May meeting, or we can do it on the regular agenda in May, because either way, this is gonna go to council in May, unless action is not taken, which I hope y'all take action before that.
2 more weeks, right? The next meeting?
Yeah, it would,
for us, a
It would be 2
workshop,
weeks.
But for council, their next meeting is next
Is-
Monday, but.
yeah, so this won't make the upcoming, yeah.
Yeah, that's what's, today is the first. That's just weird, really.
Yeah.
This is one of those months where we're ahead of them twice.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we ought to do a workshop, really get this thing in hand so we can get it to the council the next full month that they're gonna be working. I will be here, probably.
Mr. Commitment?
You said 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, our workshop would be in 2 weeks.
It falls on the day after the council meeting this month. So,
That's what I say. It's one of those weird months where.
yeah.
I'm booked for every 2 weeks. That's what we had talked about as far as workshop and trying to catch up, so.
Well, you can poll them, and you can just let us know.
I just did a shoot for workshop.
Okay.
Well, except for Joan, and
But we also will have this gentleman.
we hope to have him sworn in by then, but
Yes, we will, because the workshop is after the council meeting.
Yeah, if council lets him
after all
in.
this excitement, sitting here listening to this, he may.
You may go home and say, what did I do?
Oh, that he's
Okay,
done.
yeah.
So you, it's on me for Joan and Bud, but I'll get you an answer, but it's tentative.
You hear that,
It's good.
What's that on him?
Alex on him?
Okay, well, we'll tentatively schedule a workshop.
And that predicted the building's gonna cave in before we get anything done, Scott?
Close?
It has started to cave in.
Yeah, they're starting in mid-April is what they're proposing, and so
Oh,
yeah, 15th. So I'm hoping that
Normally he
They
would
move
have had to
fast.
move out by that time, but he's elected to stay there through construction. And construction allowed him to do that.
The house up there is really.
typically, yeah, typically 3 if you're lucky.
All right, so having all that done, any other questions regarding our meeting today? If not, I will hereby call our meeting to a close. Time is 2:52 PM.